Management or sponsors.
It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. My name is Ricky Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist and supervisor.
Yes, indeed. And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my big bro.
I was proud to be.
Welcome back.
My favorite
thank
role.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We are on the radio in South Florida, 95.3 FM and 1470 AM on WNN, and streaming live on Facebook. If you're joining us on Facebook, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be
and
here.
please hit that like and share button. And if you want to join the conversation, you can hit the send email button or give us a call here in the studio at 888-565-1470.
Yes, indeed.
And as you can see, if you're watching, you can't if you're listening on the radio, you won't know until I introduce, but we are very, very happy to have a return guest, our dear friend and colleague, Dr. Sharna Stryer.
It is so nice to be here.
Welcome back.
Yeah,
We're really
so glad
glad
to
to
have
have
you
you. And we go back a long time in our professional circles, and even before I got into this field, Dr. Stryer trained with my mentor and supervisor, and is really one of that group of pioneering sex therapists from Manhattan, which seems to have gone quiet in the 80s during the AIDS crisis, and now with sexual medicine since the late 90s.
Now.
That's right. Now we're back. We're back with a vengeance.
back.
People are talking about sex again. Sex therapy is losing its stigma. But we're really excited about it. We just want to jump right in because our topic tonight is an important one. And I know that Dr. Stryer's done considerable amount of not just research, but work, clinical work with young men dealing with sexual difficulties that seem to come around to finding the culprit being ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or more in adults. I think it's more about the attention deficit.
Yeah,
Right?
I would say that.
So that's our topic for tonight. So maybe we could start with you telling us a little bit. Well, let's just clarify the terms, right, in case anybody doesn't
Yeah.
understand, because it's one of those, diagnoses. So what's your take on the clinical definition of attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder?
Well, I'm so glad you said that because it's a term that's thrown around, and it's a neurological disorder, and it's based on the neurotransmitters. In other words, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine are at lower levels, and that creates a cascade of symptoms that a lot of young people will struggle with, and older people will also, have those symptoms at varying degrees that affects you socially, emotionally, in your workplace.
Sure.
And so when people come in, oftentimes they'll come in presenting the symptoms, and you kind of have to backslide and really begin to understand what's the bigger picture. And once you begin to understand the bigger picture, you then are in a better place to help them because you could see it through
Right,
the veil
right,
of
right.
the syndrome.
See, in kids, I think, doesn't it usually present as like a learning disability because of the difficulties in the classroom? And of course, most schools, it's
Or
become
an
more
unruly
a behavior
kid.
management thing,
Exactly.
right? But almost more like dyslexia in the fact that it impairs their ability to learn. But in adults, we often see these kinds of relational and sexual problems.
And if I may, let me just break it down because what you'll see are behaviors of inattention. In other words, not being able to hold on to a thought and to follow it through, be easily distracted
Right.
into whatever catches their eye, And so they can be that kid that can't get anything done, that is can't really sit still in a classroom.
Right, but as we talked about earlier,
Yes.
amazingly, that same kid will sit in front of a video game for 12 hours.
Yes,
with
because
that
that's the
laser
hidden
focus,
gem.
right?
The hidden gem of having this is also the ability to hyper focus.
Right.
And so you're absolutely right, like that. Whatever is immediately exciting is what they can stay on for any length of time. But if they are not excited by something, they drift.
Right. And there's no middle ground.
Exactly.
It's hyper focus or
Yes.
not focus. There
Yes.
really is nothing in between.
Exactly. Now, people don't they often say, what's ADD and what's this ADHD? And that's because there are some people that have just the distractibility syndrome. But then there's also the hyperactivity. And with that hyperactivity, hence ADHD. And that's the fidgety kid. That could be the
Right.
kid or the person that interrupts a lot, has difficulty listening, is disruptive.
And that's more
Yeah.
behavioral.
Yes.
Now, it's a little sidebar to our conversation. We're going to get into talking about how this impacts sexual expression. But just
Yes.
because it's so common, I really just want to put a pin in the myth, because psychiatrists contribute to that and to this very often. And it's just crap. This faulty thinking that, because people are confused because the treatment of choice is stimulants. Right? And you have a kid who's bouncing around, won't pay attention, and is always getting in trouble, and they put him on these medications, and all of a sudden now he's focused and sitting still and engaged, and people think that that's a sedative effect.
Right,
So
and-
there's this myth out there.
Well, the
that
paradoxical effect.
that's the BS.
Exactly.
There's
Right.
no
Yes.
such thing.
There is no paradoxical
Psychiatrists
effect.
will say, "Oh, well, it's
Right.
speed for you and me, but for a kid, it's like Valium.
Exactly.
Like it must." No.
Right. Never been
Speed
true.
is speed. Speed is not treating the hyperactivity. It's enabling the focus.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
why stimulants are effective.
Exactly.
Right.
And then it captures that hyper focus ability.
Right.
And
But
it-
speed is not the best thing to give a guy for sex functioning either. So there's a kind of a
Well, that's where we often see a lot of these issues, especially as they get older. They have been on Adderall for how many years? They've been on Ritalin for how many years? Which, again, a lot of people don't realize that they are amphetamines. Right?
Well,
So we're basically
certainly
giving
Adderall.
speed,
yeah.
which is a combination of amphetamines, and we're giving that. And again, that idea, well, it helps them focus, therefore they have ADD, which is no, it helps them focus, therefore you gave them amphetamines. But a dose that's low enough, because most people don't realize when they take amphetamines and doing speed that they do have that ability to focus, but it's usually covered over by those sort of peripheral speedy properties, which get distracting. And when they take those away, like with a sort of
Well, the-
low dose, it doesn't become distracting, and they have
Yes.
the focus.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Now, what goes along with that sometimes is you could also have symptoms of irritability when you're on the meds.
Sure.
Yes.
So that's why a lot of, particularly young people, will want to take a weekend, vacation from it, just to kind of, even though they're distracted, maybe it's not as important, but they won't have that rush of feeling.
Right. Especially if they're actually taking them, and not all those kids who are just selling them to their older, siblings and college friends.
Crushing them up and snorting them
Right.
to study
Yeah,
for
let's not
exams.
even go there.
So I recall from the last time you were on the show, we talked just very briefly because I know we were talking about something else, but you kind of stumbled onto this in working with young guys clinically, just coming to see you in your practice,
Yes.
complaining of sexual dysfunction before it became this kind of academic focus.
Yes.
So what were you seeing that
Yeah,
prompted
what
this
was
interest?
presented?
Well, they were talking about how easily they were distracted, how quickly they got bored. And then, of course, what goes along with that, their partner would be hurt. They would feel ashamed.
Do you mean like loss of
They would
erection
get-
going along
well,
with that distraction?
Yes, you would have first the lack of interest, and then you might have also the performance aspects, the erection, and females also have this, so they may easily go into a place where it's hard for them to feel the symptoms of arousal. And so how it came about is as you begin to take a good history, you hear more of the story. Well, I was that kid who had difficulty in class, or I am that person that no matter how much I try, I procrastinate, I can't get through things, I lose things, and you begin to put, that's, you know, you're an investigator. You want to do the best for your patient population. And so you hear the whole story, and you go, wait a minute, this symptoms or this reported sexual issue is part of the bigger picture. And that's how I came into it.
So, and you're actually seeing these issues, and again, these guys that were, I mean, you were correlating their erectile difficulties or performance problems with those descriptions, and is your connection that it was sort of undiagnosed ADD, or is there a relationship to the medications that they were taking for their ADD?
Well, I would say that it's none of those. I would say, actually, it's that I had to put my head into viewing the problem from the veil of the ADD or ADHD. Therefore, it's not that that individual, in the case of a male, is disinterested in their partner. It's just that they have this cascade of symptoms that's making them hard to be present. And so I begin to, in some ways, make it less personal. And it's like sometimes, you know, and I know you've worked with this, if someone is depressed, oftentimes we'll say, well, it's the depression that's talking. It's, you know, and in this case...
How does ADD talk?
Exactly.
Right.
It's in the struggle. And then another aspect of it is that in a relationship, it can do havoc.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you
get
how could you
annoyance
leave the door open? How could you lose your keys again? I mean, it could go on, and that annoyance does, of course, damage to the relationship and to the sexual relationship.
Yeah, I talk a lot about how when couples get knocked out of that lover's dynamic and into a parent-child dynamic, they're not going to see each other as very erotic.
Well, it's almost impossible to.
And if a partner is like constantly irritated and annoyed, and then even in the bedroom, there's still this like, what do you mean you're distracted? We're in the middle of making love. Now you start having an annoyed, irritated parent, and their sex life is just
So you're basically trying to say that, like, is not an erotic response.
Something like that.
Something like that.
So you got the short attention span working against you when it comes to the sexual expression, but also the other side of that is someone who is easily distracted, who needs that immediate excitement, can use sex as a way of reducing their anxiety. So therefore, you know, that energy is present, so it's experienced in a very self-oriented way in the relationship, and that gets played out in a struggle. Yeah. So it's very interesting as you begin to put the different pieces together and begin to understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, and you know, and I see how so much of this, again, in this idea of bigger picture, I see so much of this as part of a bigger picture.
Yes.
Where distractibility has become the norm. You know, I mean, we went out to just a place for dinner with our dad, just, you know, a quick, easy neighborhood kind of place to eat. And how many places now have, you know, 45 television screens, you know, each one with a different thing, you know, showing. We're constantly in this state of hyper distractibility. And I think that's something that's sort of part of that sexual and erotic template for a lot of guys in particular, but people in general.
You know, that's such a good point. I want to build on that because what was it, about like 15, 20 years old when ADD was the diagnosis du jour?
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
And then you put on top of that the digital age, which is based on gadgets that are geared toward distraction.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I
Right.
am amazed when I take a history, and part of it is that I also ask them what's going on in the environment, the stage that you're setting for the sexuality. Their phones have to be right there and on. I mean,
Yep.
the bells are going
Yep.
off. The room
Even
is a
during
mess.
sex,
Yes.
you can't turn off the
Well,
phone.
I mean,
Yes.
look at things like Vine
Wow.
and
Yes.
Instagram and so much that I mean, these are ADD
Yes.
machines.
They really, yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
people
they-
used to be annoyed by commercials watching TV.
Yes.
And now Facebook, everybody's like, "Ooh, what's that? Ooh, what's that?" It's just all about the
And-
next
hey,
clickable.
I get caught up in that too.
clickbait, right? They call it clickbait.
But even under, it's just such a norm. You know, again, it really, I
Yes.
caught myself this afternoon, but I
Yes.
catch myself doing this a lot.
Yes.
I'm going on, I
Yes.
just want to go online, I've got to check an email. And then as soon as it comes, this.
I know.
And then like 45 minutes
on.
later, I haven't gotten to my email yet. And that was the only thing I was really going to do with that. And it's just so
No,
easy.
it's becoming the new addiction. But that's for
Yes.
another conversation.
Right.
Right.
Right. And
Because-
that's really, I think, that underlying premise.
There
underneath
should,
that.
yeah, I
Yes.
think there's a connection there.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Because, you know, and taking that into, and again, we've railed for so many years, and you know, part of the groups that just, we so reject just about everything that comes along with this nonsense of porn addiction
Yes.
and all this stuff,
Yes.
and the way they legitimize it, and this whole new thing about porn-induced erectile dysfunction. You know, it's not the porn, but I have to say there is something that is a part of that. And I think there is a distractibility. It's a conditioned response. But I think when people are so used to the
Yes.
isolated sex.
And the constant
Yes.
changing the scene.
Well,
there-
it's
there's
a
that scene.
novelty.
You
You're
can't,
referring
you can't
to the
change the
importance
scene when
of
you're
the
with a real
novelty.
person.
but I think that's
right?
also a separate issue,
Yes.
right? Because I think that novelty and that hunting part of
Yes.
it and all of that stuff, I think that's very much a part of it, but it really is kind of a separate issue.
Yeah.
Because when somebody is so conditioned
Yes.
that they basically are alone. So, I mean, think of it as a straight line, a thin, narrow, straight line between their head and their genitals.
Yes.
And that's all it is.
Yes.
The erotic feeling, the lust,
Yes.
the
Yes.
fantasy, and the genitals. And it's
Now-
a nice straight line.
Now, I want to also say, in light of that, the importance of certain steps that will help that person be present. Because
Yes, that's what we
need
need to hear.
really, you know,
Right.
you're not like doomed into this
Oh, no,
whole,
absolutely
yeah.
not. And again, what I'm really looking at in the
There
comparison.
is a very good book. Peter Shankman is the author. It's called Faster Than Normal is the name of the book. And it gives an awful lot of good suggestions. And I want to go over some of them.
Sure.
And some that is just very much a part of our practice. I mean, and that is taking the time to kind of be present. Now, what does that mean? You hear it all the time. It's almost like, really? That term again? But that means doing some breathing, taking that time to get centered, to feel the presence of your partner, whether it be through touch, whether it be through conversation. But you have to step into the room and step into your body and step into the connection between you and your partner. And that's one way that you could slow your mind down if you have ADHD. The other is through the understanding about the novelty and the excitement. So that could be entering into sharing erotic thoughts and feelings, connecting in that way, focusing on sensory-based feeling.
Right. And you know, there's a dilemma in that. One of these ironies that we all know as
Yes.
sex therapists, that for most people, unfortunately,
Yes.
having intercourse in the dark, maybe with a little buzz on, is less intimate than that kind of connected,
but more comfortable.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
Yeah,
fortunately. I mean, it depends.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are not visual, particularly. They don't lead
But
visually.
even the conversation can be, you know, people are more afraid it's too intimate, the conversation about what they like, what they don't,
Yeah.
what they want to do, than just doing it.
I'm absolutely, I feel that way. Under ideal conditions, the conversation to me is more important. If it has to be with very dim lights, I'll go for the conversation and sacrifice maybe the visual connection. And then as it becomes more fluid and more comfortable, I think then people get more relaxed.
And again, this I think is where people need to kind of focus on moving toward, because taking a step sort of back to the side a little bit. Again, when we look at people, and especially guys, that have conditioned their response so much, they have spent so much time, basically, again, whether they're using porn or not, but there's the idea, again, the novelty.
Yes.
I can look at something for a few seconds and click on something else. I'm going to keep that fresh. It's all me.
Right.
I don't have to have a conversation with anybody. I don't have to worry about anything that I say or do or that I want will maybe upset them or do something. All I have is the thought in my head I want. Right? So that's that real sort of narrow, straight line. Now when you add a partner, it's all distraction, because now it's, okay, all these little things. Now, what are they going to think? How are they going to react? What do I say to them? There's things like, oh, wait, breath. Right? There's no bad breath when you're basically at home and you're in your porn. There's no knee in your thigh. There's no, oh, I don't like this foot. There's no, okay, this is
Where
nice.
your
I want
mind
something
would
more.
grab onto that and take you out of the room.
Right. So this is the porn-induced attention
Yes.
deficit
Yes.
Yeah.
that I
Yes.
think is really
I know we
going
have
on.
a mutual friend in Steve Snyder who talks
Yes.
about this kind of deferred body dysmorphia, where
Yes.
instead of an obsession about something about your own body, somebody gets fixated on something on their partner's body.
Yes.
And totally takes them out.
Yes.
And there's something funny, too, about sex, that people seem more easily distracted than, like, say, eating a meal. Right? If somebody says, oh, I'm going to get up and go and get the salt and pepper. Nobody, you're not going to come back to find a partner. Oh, you've ruined it. I can't. The meal's over.
I can't eat my meal
Right?
anymore.
But with sex, the slightest little, just shifting position. Hey, what are
Yes.
you doing? What? Oh, stop it. You're ruining it.
And I'm going to
Right.
go one step before that. And that is, I think we have to look at the environment. The ambiance is very important.
Right.
Because someone with ADHD who's easily distracted, if you have a chaotic environment, a messy environment,
There's too many distractions.
too many things, like they'll notice, oh my God, this or that, and they're off. And so that's another thing that I work on, that the stage, the ambience has to be set. Music can be a real help.
Right.
You know, like when you go for a massage, you have this relaxing music that helps the brain waves just come on down so you could sail. That's very important. The smell, the lotions, all of these things support the sexual experience
Absolutely.
for someone with ADHD.
So that's why we weird sex therapists are so big on exquisite details.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
I love
And
that.
why?
Creating that was
That's
Susan's. That was
detail.
Susan's. Yeah.
That's
And using
Yes.
and being able to, again, account all of the senses are involved.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think with somebody with
Yes.
something like ADD, it's even
Yes.
more so
Yes.
important to allow them to connect with all of those.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you also have, because I've in talking to a lot of guys over the years as well. And this may sound really weird, and maybe I'm just
From
putting
you?
this into
Really?
from me. Go figure.
Imagine.
But do you find that, like, with a lot of these guys, especially
Yes.
because guys, most people are very habitual. So when, especially guys with ADD, that there's certain patterns, like when they are getting aroused, when they are achieving or experiencing stimulation, not even just sexual, they're often in a seated position. Right? So their
Seated,
body
like
sitting, like
sitting.
sitting either on a computer or sitting on a couch watching TV with all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
to lay down and be prone while it may be a completely different set of internal experiences for them. And I'm wondering if you've ever kind of
Do you know,
looked at a positional factor with some of that stuff.
Do you know, I've never thought about that, and I find that very interesting. My association to that is that they may feel more exposed. I mean, literally,
Sure.
but also
Yeah, it's a more
emotionally,
vulnerable.
figurally, more
Right.
vulnerable,
Right.
perhaps.
Which
Yes.
may be a lot more distracting what ifs and
Yes.
this and all that kind of stuff.
But yes, and I want to piggyback on that and say the power of the erotic mind can, make a lot of bridges for a lot of people. And that is that when you were involved in porn masturbation, for instance, you're not really accessing the erotic fantasy. You know, it's visual, and so you don't really learn how can I stimulate that. And so when you step
Sexy
away
thoughts.
from the when you step away from the screen and you are in an interaction, you're at a loss. How do I do this? And I'm hearing it also from females as well these days.
Yeah.
So it's not just like this is all about the guy.
Right. What other tips you got as our time rapidly?
Yes.
I cannot say enough. The very basic, maybe it's the nurse in me, but exercising is so important to your sense of well-being.
Absolutely.
And also, which Peter Shankman says in his book, is a way of bolstering in a natural way the neurotransmitters that are missing. Exercise will do it. It can be much more immediate. Eating right, keeping the sugar down.
Yeah.
Good
is
sleep.
very-
And the fat.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and the fat.
Yeah.
All these things, because we're a whole person, it's not just about our genitals. It's about the whole body.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more, if we can, tip, because again, for me, this is part of the sticky wicket, especially for people that often get lost in their head. And when we talk about
yes.
mindfulness,
Yes.
how do we
Yes.
kind of find a nice
Yes.
balance between mindfulness and not just getting lost
Yes,
in our
thank
head?
you, because that's the point I forgot. That was very good. You put me onto it. And that is, you know, moving from those distracting, negative, obsessive thoughts that we all have in our head and into positive affirmations is very important. CPT teaches you that.
CPT is what?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh, CBT.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
You know, learning that process of reframing thoughts to positive and understanding that your active mind is a wonderful vehicle. You just have to use it in the proper way. And with that, you could have a great sex life and a better relationship.
Really nicely said.
Wonderful.
Please,
Yes.
before the music starts, tell our listeners and viewers how they can find you.
Oh,
Your
thank you.
website.
Yes, my website is sharnastriar.com. That's as my name is spelled, SharnaStriar.com. Or you can just Google my name and you'll find all kinds of resources. That will
Absolutely.
lead you to me.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And if any therapists are watching or listening, or sexual medicine practitioners, I invite you to check out modernsextherapyinstitutes.com. And that's about our time for the week.
Yes, indeed.
Always
Thank
goes
you
by
guys
too
It
quickly.
really
Thank
does.
you
Thanks
again,
so much
Dr.
for
Sharna
coming
Stryer.
back.
Yeah.
Such a
And
pleasure
we
to
will
see you.
be here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for more Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Indeed.
Excellent.
Great night and have a good week.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.